So welcome everyone to our Meet the Editors of Small Indie Presses. Today we have Blair, Feminist Press, Tin House, Deep Vellum, Seven Stories, Europa Editions, and Verso. And they'll be presenting fall and winter and spring titles. We're going to keep you muted while the editors present, but please feel free to ask your questions in the chat. And if you raise your hand during a presentation, we'll keep an eye out for that, and you might be able to ask your question directly. Our MC today is Anna Thorne from the Independent Press Caucus. She put together this event, and Anna will introduce the editors, and they'll take it from there. So I'm gonna turn it over to you, Anna.
Great, thank you so much, Linda Marie. Thank you to you and to SIBA for organizing this, and hello, SIBA booksellers. Welcome, and thank you so much for coming to this during a very, very busy time. I'm delighted to be here with these fabulous indie presses, and I'll move us briskly along with a brief introduction for each one. But first, I just want to say a very quick word about the Independent Publishers Caucus and Indie Playlist. All of the presses you're about to hear from are members of IPC, and several are taking place in our Indie Playlist promo this month, which gets you an extra 5% on 24 very cool, timely titles, and incorporates a $500 display prize and exclusive virtual in-conversation events. You can learn more about Indie Playlist. I'm gonna throw a link and my email into the chat. So please, you can check the website or contact me with any questions that you have about it. And without further ado, I am going to introduce Robin Miura. Robin is the Senior Editor and Associate Publisher at Blair Publishing. She's worked in publishing for 17 years in a wide variety of roles and has a passion for literary fiction and creative nonfiction. Robin, take it away.
Hi, everyone. So glad you're here today. I believe Anna is going to put, or has already put, my Edelweiss collection link in the chat. So if you want to follow along, really what I'm going to do is just kind of go through that collection and tell you a little bit about each of these books. I'm happy to answer questions. As Anna said, if you want to raise your hand, or maybe Linda said that, but if you want to raise your hand, I can try to answer them in real time, but also, you know, you can put them in the chat and I'll try to take care of any questions that you have. Starting off, our lead title for, you know, what's technically a fall season for us, but is March, is The Baddest Girl on the Planet by Heather Fries. This is a really fun but not frivolous literary fiction title. It's gotten some really good attention already from shelf awareness and some places that are excited to see it coming out. Heather is a great author. She would be great in any kind of bookstore event. She would want to have virtual events. She's very comfortable with that. This book takes place on the Outer Banks of North Carolina, a place where Heather has lived herself in the past. And the scenery, the setting is really fantastic. The protagonist of this novel is the plucky Evie Austin, and she's fantastic. She's like your favorite friend who you want to go on a beach trip with, or to Las Vegas. And as a matter of fact, we see Las Vegas a couple of times. She's your friend who continues making questionable decisions, and sometimes you just want to take her by the shoulders and shake her and say, stop doing that. But she's also the most fun you've ever had and the greatest sense of humor. Evie got saddled in her small North Carolina town very early in life with a bad girl reputation, and this book follows her as she figures out how to live through that reputation and what she's going to do with it now that she's a single mother in a small town trying to break out of this view that everybody already has of her. It's a really fun book. If any of you are familiar with the work of Lee Smith, I would say she's like a modern day Lee Smith. She's picking up that mantle of these humorous characters who are funny at the same time they're facing like really big life decisions and with very serious consequences. But you don't feel bogged down and you don't get lost in misery. You're cheering for her all the way through. So it's a really, really great fun book. It's got a fantastic cover if you're looking through there. It's been compared by myself and others to Bridget Jones's Diary. It's this nice encapsulation of what it is to be a young single woman trying to make your way through right now. But again, the added twist of a very much loved but unexpected child along the way. Oh, thank you. And you're going to see my hand for a minute because I'm going to go back to my list. Okay. Next is Woodsmoke. This is a poetry collection, but some of you may already know the work of Wayne Caldwell. He is the author of, Catalucci. His first novel is Catalucci. That's his biggest novel. Requiem by Fire was his second novel, but this is poetry. Don't let that scare any of your readers off if they're not particularly poetry people, because this is narrative poetry and it's written in the dialect of Western North Carolina, which is very accessible, but it's not hee-haw down home hillbilly. There's gorgeous language in here. When this came onto my desk originally, I was like, well, I don't know, Western North Carolina poetry, I'm not sure that's for us. The language is gorgeous, and we fell in love with this in our offices and found ourselves stopping and reading passages of this out loud to each other. So I'd really encourage you to check it out. It's just a really gorgeous book. Next is Quota Philomena. This is a children's title. Fun, bright, colorful. This is a story of a little girl whose cat gets out and all the anxiety she feels when she's imagining all the terrible things that might happen to her cat. And her two dads try to help her through that and help her figure out how to navigate it. So it's a fun story full of imagination, but also a story about dealing with anxiety for young children. And a nice book that presents a pair of same-sex parents, but it is not the focus of the book. These just happen to be her parents. So this is a really great title that we're excited about. Part of the proceeds go to Kids in Crisis, which is one of the oldest support organizations for LGBTQ youth in the US. And Joseph Belil, the author, works with that organization closely. And I'm trying to be fast because I know I'm coming up against my 6 minutes. A book that we crashed into our season that is going to be available here in the next few weeks is COVID-19 Helpers. Some of you probably already sell Beth Bacon's other books. This is a book that won the Children's Book Competition for Emory University. Has been available as an ebook, but now we have available in a print edition. It's available in English and Spanish. Ebooks and print books, and it's a book about helping children think about the things that are going on right now, the changes in their lives, the birthday parties, the school, all the things they're missing, and how the things they are doing, like wearing masks and staying home, is actually a way to battle this disease and to help us all come through on the other side. So it explains what COVID is, explains ways to help keep yourself safe, ways to help keep other people safe, and portrays the children as it talks about all the heroes in this, the people at the grocery store and the truck drivers and the mail carriers, but also lets the children know that they're doing their part to be heroes too by staying home and wearing their masks and doing all the things that they have to do now. Bullets and Bandages. This is a Civil War book, but it's not your typical run-of-the-mill battlefield war book. This is about Gettysburg, but it is mostly about how when the battle was over, the small town of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, was overwhelmed and inundated with all the war wounded, and what they did in the days and weeks and even months following that, when public buildings and barns and even private homes were converted into makeshift hospitals to take care of the thousands of war wounded that they had on their hands when the armies marched out of town. So this is a history and it's filled with anecdotes and stories, but it's also a guidebook for people who want to go to Gettysburg and see some of these places that are still standing. Quite interestingly, one that still has a blood stain on the floor. So there's your little Halloween link. Grp of Jazz is a reissue of a poetry collection by Leonard Moore, who has an international reputation for writing haiku. This is not a haiku collection, but it's a collection of poetry about the musicality and the language of jazz. Some really beautiful poems about the musical genre of jazz, talking about the history and the intersections in his own life, and things like that. I'll move on finally to What Makes You Think You're Awake. This was the winner of our Backlist Award for writing by a woman. The judge was Carmen Maria Machado, and these stories are going to really appeal to fans of Carmen Maria Machado. They are stories that have some speculative aspects, some dystopian aspects, really great thought-provoking stories. We call her a prophet because these stories were written a long time before COVID-19, but one of the stories is a very thought-provoking story about a pandemic of a mosquito-borne illness, but with some very eerie similarities to what we're going through right now. So this is a great collection. Like I said, if you like Carmen Maria Machado, Shirley Jackson, if you liked Mexican Gothic, these stories are going to appeal to readers of all those books. So it's really great, one we're excited about. To Drink from the Well, the struggle for racial equality at the nation's oldest public university. That university is UNC Chapel Hill, and it talks about the history of the university, which quite literally the university was built by enslaved people. And there's, despite the very liberal reputation of that university, it talks about all the distressing and disturbing racial justice history. My time is up. The other books have some very regional focus if you have North Carolina or Southeastern readers. Thank you. That's a beautiful book with lots of great photos. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Robin. And that is Blair Publishing, and you can find that Edelweiss collection and take a look at those titles she referenced at the end in the chat. So please do take a look at that. Next, we're going to have Tin House Books. Maisie Cochran is the editorial director at Tin House. Before coming to Tin House, she worked at Inkwell Management Literary Agency in New York. Maisie, go right ahead.
Hi. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Linda Marie and Anna and Siba for hosting this event. I'm really excited to be here. I'm from a small town in Arkansas, and bookstores were my first window into a larger world and a bigger community. So this is really exciting for me to talk with you today. All right, I'm going to kick things off with The House of Vesper Sands by Porrick O'Donnell, Irish author. It comes out in hardcover on January 12th. And this is just the perfect book to talk about over a hot cup of tea or something stronger. It is so chilling, so propulsive, so haunting. The only time I got up from reading this book was to check the door, make sure it was locked. When Craig Poplars and I he's our publisher, first heard about this book, it was from Helen MacDonald, one of my favorite authors, and she was just raving about this book on social media. So I looked it up, and it came out in the UK to really good fanfare, and I couldn't believe it hadn't come out in the United States. And after we bought the book, Helen came in with a huge endorsement, and I'll read it to you really quickly. It said, "It manages to do 100 marvelous things at once. Funny, eerie, tender, haunting, and fantastically enjoyable. It's a 19th century supernatural procedural mystery that is also an impassioned meditation on love, on duty, loss, suffering, power, and injustice." So, and shortly after buying it, never in my history, usually I have to knock on doors for blurbs, but they came instead my way from Benjamin Dreyer, Sandra Newman, and Sarah Perry called it the most compelling portrait of late Victorian London since Crimson Petal and the White. So you really sit up and listen when you get those kind of endorsements from those great authors. And now it's kind of a hard task to tell you what I love about it, but I have to tell you that the detective duo at the center of this book just had my heart. It's Detective Cutter and Gideon Bliss, and it really is a modern day Sherlock Watson, but feels really fresh and modern. I hadn't read a Victorian mystery that felt this sensible, this to the time. The women in this book have a ton of agency, play very important roles into the unraveling of the central mystery. I guess probably most helpful, if I were to draw a Venn diagram, it would be the Turn of the Screw, Murder on the Orient Express, the Golden Compass, and then the House of the Vesper Sands would sit, squarely in the middle of all of that. So the takeaway is it's just such a smart literary thriller, perfect tale, twists and turns, great for winter, perfect for book clubs, a really fun read. So I hope you love this one. I'm going to quickly highlight just two more Tin House titles. This one, Bride of the Sea by Iman Quota, paperback on 1/26/21. I love this cover. When I first bought this book, it is so elegant, so striking. I had to remind myself I was reading a debut over and over. The prose is just so stunning. I feel like it could comfortably sit among Salt Houses, Exit West, Etop Rooms, A Woman Is No Man. And it really balances itself sort of perfectly between the two disparate worlds of Saudi Arabia and the United States. And it's a sweeping saga. It covers four decades, two countries, wars, shorter peaceful terms, more wars. And when first talking to Iman, who was raised in both countries, she's grew up in both Cleveland and Jeddah, she said something I thought really captured this book. She said that she wanted this book not to be an American book or a Saudi book, but a Saudi-American book. And she really depicts in vivid and beautiful details the realities of everyday life in each country, the meals, clothing, weddings, the themes that are both timeless and modern, two faiths, two families. And I don't want to give much away, but I will tell you that it begins with a disappearance, a fleeing, and it builds to one of the most complicated and commanding reunions that I just can't stop thinking about it. So when you read this one, send me a note. I'm dying to talk to somebody about this book. All right, last up, I am going to talk to you about The Butcher's Blessing by Ruth Gilligan. I know there's some already fans of Ruth and Siba. You guys were so great behind her last novel, and this one was just nominated or just announced as a November Indie Next pick, so thank you very much. And I can't talk about this book open it better than Ruth opens the novel itself. The novel opens with a photograph hung on a New York art gallery wall, and it's the first time since it was taken 2 decades before that it's been seen. And the photograph shows this slaughterhouse in rural Ireland, and there's a painting of Virgin Mary on one wall, and there's a meat hook suspended from the ceiling. And from its point hangs a man, a butcher. And this photograph captures such an act of unspeakable violence, and it sets into motion the entire novel. It is page-turning, it is gothic and atmospheric, it is the tension between the modern and ancient Ireland sort of pitted against each other with customs and, the arrival of modernity. It is so fascinating. It's drawn lots of comparisons to Tana French, Thea Obrecht. Colin McCann said that it's dark, wild, mythic, and unsuspecting, and absolutely riveting. And I saw that Jamie Southern from Bookmarks in Winston-Salem said, she wrapped it up really nicely, I thought, said, "This is an incredibly well-crafted novel that shocked me with revelations at the end that I did not see coming." And I haven't met a reader yet that saw this ending coming. So I'm thrilled for you to check out our list. We have a lot of other great titles if you want to get on the Edelweiss. And that's it for Tin House today. But thanks so much for having me. And I'm so excited to hear about all these books and be here with all these great editors. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Maisie. That was great. And that is Tin House Books. You can find that collection also in the chat. And I'm going to move to Deep Vellum Books. Will Evans is a publisher and translator with a knack for finding undertold and outstanding stories and connecting them to audiences, which he will do now. Welcome, Will.
Hello, everyone. It's so cool to go after Blair. I used to live in Durham, North Carolina, and so shout out to Blair, and to go after Tin House, one of the inspirations for me to even start Deep Vellum in the first place. I grew up in Wilmington, North Carolina, so shout out to any North Carolinians who are listening in right now. Woo, I see some dancing, thank you. And I grew up in that small town dreaming of the world, and so that's also what influenced Deep Vellum. And so for me, books are a way to travel and to learn more about people who are outside of my experience and driven by curiosity and a sense of like wanting to connect with people I don't know yet. That's what guides everything we do at Deep Vellum. And so today we're based in Dallas, Texas. We do about 20 books a year right now of fiction, nonfiction, and poetry from all over the world. We have 4 imprints that sort of do all these different things. And then we also do a lot of literary programming and stuff. And we love working with bookstores. So if we've never done a program together and you have something you think would fit, let's be best friends. And thanks to all the stores on here we have done stuff with before, like I see you, Avid, what's up? And so it is a joy to present a few books to you. Rather than just screen sharing, I will hide also my mustache so that you can see a few of our new books. One we're really proud about that's coming out this month is a collaboration with the University of Oklahoma and World Literature Today. It's this beautiful hardcover book called Dispatches from the Republic of Letters. This is a book for the lover of words in your life. How many people on this call have heard about the Neustadt Prize for Literature given out every other year by the University of Oklahoma? No one? It's called the American Nobel. It's been given to laureates, including Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Octavio Paz, several who went on to win the Nobel Prize later. But these days, when the Nobel Prize is doing different things, there is an interesting worldliness to this prize that is lacking from other prizes in the world. And it comes out from the University of Oklahoma. And this would have been their 50th year. The festival would actually be happening next week. And if you'd like to tune in, the winner this year is Ismail Kadare, and who's the amazing Albanian writer. And so they're going to be celebrating him. This is a collection of essays and speeches by the winner of the prize for the first 50 years. And it's like everything you would love about literature is these speeches. It's people talking about the importance of writing and reading to bringing us all together through hard times. This is the book for us all to read in this moment. It's what brings us all together, is this love of books, trying to get through the BS of these times. But also you should order this book because when was the last time an indie publisher did a book with a ribbon? We did a book with a ribbon. I'm very, very proud of this ribbon. I want you to know that some of the most recent award recipients here at the Neustadt that are in the book that you would love include Dubravka Ugresic, who is published by Open Letter Books, as well as Edwidge Danticat, who is the most amazing writer. Please check it out. Some of just the best writing you're ever going to get. And if you don't believe me, you could read the nice blurb on the back cover by Joy Harjo. And so if you want a review copy of this, please email me. It's also on Edelweiss right now. It's an absolutely gorgeous book and one that will stand the test of time. And then when it comes to frontlist stuff, if you want some poetry, we've got an amazing book of poetry by a Moroccan-Dutch poet named Mustafa Stitu. And so, I mean, this is something really interesting in the world, is how much I've learned about the way that immigration has shaped stories. So many of my favorite American stories are by immigrants to America, and same way around the world. Mustafa Stitu is considered one of the kings, one of the titans of all Dutch literature right now. He was born in Morocco originally, uses the Dutch language in the most beautiful poetic way, and he's making his English language debut in a book called Two Half Faces. So if you're into the idea of a Moroccan Dutch poet who is willing to take on all the social injustices that make the front page news every day these days, this is what we're here for too. We're here for you. And as Indigenous Peoples Day was this week on Monday, I wanted to share a book that's not front list. And I don't know if this is cool, Anna, but please work with me. We're always reprinting books and we're always up to crazy things in Dallas. But one of those things is a book called Like a New Sun. This is a book of poetry by 6 indigenous Mexican poets. And I should put the word indigenous in quotes. We could have a conversation about that another time. But all 6 of these poets write in languages that are not Spanish and come from different groups of Mexico. When was the last time you read something from Mexico that was not written in Spanish? Trick question. Doesn't happen much. But we have these amazing poets from across Mexico doing incredible things. And we just reprinted a new beautiful edition of this, so it's back in stock. Absolutely stunning stuff. And so if you have lovers of poetry, lovers of indigenous literatures, we have a lot. And also a book that was supposed to come out over the summer. We pushed it a little bit due to the pandemic, called Red Ants by a guy named Pergentino Jose. He's from Oaxaca, Mexico. And the book's actually just arrived in our store this week, so I don't have one in my hands yet. I haven't gone in the office, but it was written in Sierra Zapotec originally. And the book is really astounding. They're short stories. And for those who love magical realism, this is like a totally new take on magical realism that we've never seen before. And for a little bit of like, who is this author, Percantino Jose, who writes in Sierra Zapotec, a language I don't know? And if you have customers who'd be curious, this guy, it's like, okay, you love Gabriel Garcia Marquez and Isabel Allende, you'll love Percantino Jose. And also, it's very short, and we all need short stories these days for our attention span, I know. And also, Publishers Weekly said it was one of the top 10 books of the summer. So you know it's legit. It's not just me. It's super legit. And then also, what would be like the one other book I could tell you about right now? Has anyone here read Mario Beatin before? Amazing Mexican author? No? Mario Beatin is an amazing dude. His first book came out in 2009 from City Lights. And then he had a couple books come out from Phoneme Media, which is now an imprint of Deep Vellum. And we have 2 books coming out by Mario this fall that are amazing. And so these are for those who love Robert Walser, who love just European literature and also love Mexican literature. He is Mexican, lives in Mexico, writes in Spanish, but his books are set all over the world. One of the books is called Miss Murakami's Garden, and it's set in Japan, and it moves with the pace of a Zen koan. It's really beautiful, very meditative, and it's also like 80 pages long. Gorgeous. You can read it in one sitting. I love short novels. I love them, and I hope you do too. I also love 900-page novels, but more about that later. And then we're doing another book by Mario. It's considered his classic. It's a book about plague and pandemic and a response to it. It's called Beauty Salon. And it's actually a brand new translation of a book that's been out of print for a while, the book that came out from City Lights. And it's a new translation addressing this moment and why we need to read this book now, because it's how humans respond to pandemic together and how they come together and the things that bring us together. It's a really haunting and beautiful book. And we're going to have that one as a drop-in in December. So right ahead of the holidays, which I know is a great time to do translated literature in your stores. And so thank you for doing all those table displays of translated literature. But I did want to share one American author. This will be my last one. And I talk fast, so forgive me. But always write me, will@deepvellum.org. I'll put it in the chat too with my Edelweiss link, which I'm figuring out how to do. And the other book is a guy named Ethan Rutherford, who is an American author. He teaches at Trinity College in Connecticut. And this is his second book of short stories. The first one came out from Echo or HMH, one of the big 5. And we got to do his second book, which is astounding because his first one got insane reviews, sold so well. He's a favorite of booksellers. He was a bookseller himself at Majors and Quinn in Minneapolis, which means he's one of us. We love him. He loves you. And we have galleys of that when it comes out in March. And so we just got the galleys in and we printed extra for all of our favorite booksellers. And so we want you to know that we do international authors from a whole lot of different perspectives. Of our first 100 books, 28 of them are from Latin America, and they're translated from 37 languages around the world, which is pretty cool. That's not bad, but we have a long way to go. So if you ever have a tip about a book too, hit me up. And again, we would love to program stuff with you digitally or in person whenever your state store leadership allows. And thank you for all you do. And thanks for putting this on, Anna. It's really amazing to be a part of this group.
Thank you so much for being here, Will, and hooray for translated literature. That is a noble cause, and I thank you for that. We're going to go to Verso Books. Jessie Kindig is an editor at Verso, and her writing has appeared in N+1, Art Forum, Jacobin, and the Boston Review. And Jessie, over to you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Anna. It's really great to talk with you all. As editors, we don't often get to, and I'm afraid that I'm not from the South like my other colleagues, but I did grow up in Seattle, so I did grow up in a bookstore, and so I'm very thankful for all that you do. I'm really happy to be here. The first book that I want to talk about, Anna, I hope can put our Edelweiss up on the chat, and I can share my screen in a second. But the first book I want to talk about, I actually have right here. It's a book that I edited, embarrassingly enough, the Verso Book of Feminism, Revolutionary Words from 4 Millennia of Rebellion. And this is a collection that we put out for the house's 50th anniversary, which is this year. And I put it together over the course of 2 years. It collects feminist voices from all over the world and all throughout written history. And so the book moves from 2300 BCE to the Black Lives Matter protests of this summer. The book is a collection of short excerpts ordered chronologically with short introductions. And so it's a really perfect gift book for your favorite feminist. It also has these like very beautiful end papers that show a print of Japanese female samurai called the Onobugeisha, and more. I think it's a really illuminating way to enter feminist history. So I was trained as a history professor and used to be one, but I was really surprised how in putting this book together, it made me think of history differently. It asked me to consider feminism differently and think about what it was and what it might become, because the book asks you to think about Betty Friedan alongside women's movements in post-colonial Africa, about Virginia Woolf alongside the explosion of Japanese literary feminist magazines, and to think about queer manifestos today and compare them to the erotic lesbian poetry of the first century Persian courts. We're really thrilled. It's coming out, I think, next week. So we're very happy to share that with you right now. And then let me keep it here. I can share my screen. Did that work? Yes? Okay. I want to keep talking about our feminist titles as well, since it's a big part of Verso's list. It's part of my own personal list, and I'm very, very proud of them. And they all took several years in the making. So we have a number of titles coming up this spring. The next one is Taking a Long Look, a collection of essays from Vivienne Gornick. It's a career-spanning collection of essays, and Vivienne is a writer's writer, an iconic feminist, a literary critic, and an acclaimed memoirist, and also an inveterate New Yorker. And so this is a collection that was really put together and driven by Vivienne herself. I asked her if we might reprint her incendiary essays from the Village Voice on the rise of the women's movement in the 1970s that have long been out of print. And she said instead, well, why don't we make a bigger book? So one day she showed up in my office in Brooklyn and had brought me a giant file of essays and said, here, why don't you sort through these? We'll make a book. And so we've done that through a process of first meetings and then socially distanced lunches in Greenwich Village. So this, again, is the first collection to pull from 50 years of her writing. You'll see pieces on Philip Roth, on Hannah Arendt, about the cultural impact of Silent Spring and Uncle Tom's Cabin, as well as personal essays about knowing oneself through reading. And this is really for readers that you have that love Joan Didion, Alexander Chee, Louis Menand, Rebecca Solnit. It's a really beautiful book, and we couldn't be happier to be working with Vivienne. The next book that I want to talk about is coming out, I believe, for Valentine's Day 2021, called Tomorrow Sex Will Be Good Again. And we really hope the book is right, by Catherine Angel. And this is a book that when I first read it in a proposal form, I said, this is a book that I've been waiting my whole life to read. And it really is. And what I meant was that this is a book that is giving us a new language of sexuality, of desire, and of power that we so desperately need. It's a really beautifully written, accessible, essayistic book. Catherine Angel, who's a literary professor and creative writing professor and author in London, she surveys scientific understandings of female desire from Freud to Kinsey to present-day science. She looks at Me Too debates over consent, assault, and feminism, and she looks at popular culture. And she wants to challenge our assumptions about what female desire actually is. Women, she argues, are being asked to reconcile a sexuality that's really designed for male pleasure with a feminist insistence on sex as only empowerment. And in this environment, she asks, how can women possibly know what they want, and how can we expect them to? And instead, Catherine proposes that we need to think of sex as a conversation, and that we need to stop insisting that desire is something that we can know absolutely, and instead is something that can be explored together. And perhaps then, she says, sex will be good again. The next book is The Elegy for Mary Turner, which is coming out in February of next year for Black History Month. This is a very powerful account of lynching in America, told through the evocative art from artist, activist, and professor Rachel Marie Crane Williams. And I'm going to show you some of the art as I talk. Can you all see this? Is this working? So you get a sense of what the book is. It's going to be printed in full color. The book tells the story of how in late May 1918 in Valdosta, Georgia, 10 Black men and 1 woman, Mary Turner, who was 8 months pregnant at the time, were lynched and tortured by mobs of white citizens, leading to an NAACP investigation. And the art, as you can see, works with Rachel's own lithographs, with watercolor, and also uses collage with letters and ephemera from Valdosta's archives and from the county archives in Georgia, as well as Rachel's own hand-painted lettering. And alongside the art, which is about 80 pages, again, full color pages in the book, are contributions, short written contributions from the surviving descendants of Mary Turner, commemorating the event, and abolitionist activist Mariam Kaba, who wrote about Say Her Name and Black Women Today protesting violence. The proceeds of the book are going to the National Civil Rights Museum in Atlanta. And so this is another book that we're really hoping can be hand-sold, displayed, and that we're really excited. It's a kind of departure for Verso, but I think personally that it's one of the kind of most beautiful and evocative ways of telling a history of violence that I've seen. And finally, at the bottom of our Edelweiss here, I want to mention really briefly our new fiction imprint, which is very cleverly named Verso Fiction, but is now in its second year, and it focuses on contemporary modern novels from voices all over the world. So it's largely been work in translation, and largely so far work from women authors, from Norway, from France, from Japan, from South Africa, from Pakistan, and from England. And the imprint publishes about 4 titles per year, 2 per season. And so this fall, as you'll see here, we have the Norwegian's Vigdis Hjorth, whose novel Long Live the Post Horn is about the importance of the postal service, something that we're all thinking about right now, I imagine. And musician Jenny Vall's horror story novel featuring witch covens and death metal, Girls Against God. And in the spring, upcoming, we have 2 novels. For the first, or 2 books. The first is a collection of stories from iconic avant-garde Japanese feminist science fiction author Izumi Suzuki that have never been translated into English before, called Terminal Boredom. And the second is a novel from Joseph Andras, translated from the French, Tomorrow They Won't Dare to Murder Us, about the Algerian War. And this is a novel that won the Prix Goncourt in France. And so we're very happy to be bringing all of these to you. I will stop sharing, and I will just say thank you again to all of you and to Anna and Siba for putting this together.
Thank you so much, Jessie. So much good stuff, beautiful books. We now have Feminist Press. I'm going to introduce Lauren Hook. She is the senior editor at Feminist Press. She also manages foreign rights and overseas production. Lauren, welcome.
Hey everyone, I'm Lauren, and I'm senior editor at Feminist Press. We're a mission-driven nonprofit publisher founded in 1970 to supply literary text to the burgeoning women's studies movement of the time. So like Verso, this is undeniably a memorable year and also our 50th anniversary. We've since expanded our vision, and now we publish about 12 to 15 books a year that are largely contemporary. So we focus on activist nonfiction, queer fiction, classic reissues, literary translations, and even the occasional 4-color children's book, which is always fun. My particular passion at the press is our works in translation. I spent a good
Yes, she is also frozen for me. I'm going to give it a moment. Okay. I think we will give her a second and move on since it's we've got a time crunch here. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to have 7 stories. Ruth Wiener, I'm going to have you go, and I will put your Edelweiss collections in. So yeah, go right ahead, and I'll message Lauren now. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much, Anna, and thanks, Siba, for having us all here today. I'm going to start with a few fall books because I know that you guys are in a crunch time with the fall and looking forward to big holiday season, fingers crossed. And then I'll mention a couple upcoming titles. And I also have a couple kids books that I'm talking about. So if there are no kids booksellers here, please pass all this info on to your kids salespeople. I am going to share a screen so you can see covers. I don't have the books here, and I also don't have a cool mustache like Will, so I'm going to share my screen. And I will mention also, if you if you are interested in any PDFs and can't find them on Edelweiss to download, most of the stuff is up there. You can email me directly. Anna, feel free to drop my email into the chat there. And any authors, if you're interested in virtual events, let us know by all means. Okay, so sharing screen, hopefully. Okay, so first of all, is Inosanto Nagara. Are you all seeing this? Hopefully. Inosanto, hopefully you all know him as the author of A is for Activist, and hopefully you've all been selling that book like crazy this fall and over the summer and spring. And hopefully you'll want to have this new picture book of his. It's just out right now on your shelves as well. Ino's books, all of them show a new generation of readers, a world of justice, peace, diversity, and respect. And this new book focuses on issues that we're all out there fighting for, told in bright and gentle rhyme schemes. Nagara is kind of amazing. He proves again and again that activist books can sell. A is for Activist has, I think, 250,000 copies in print. And especially right now, parents are looking for this sort of book for their kids, and teachers and librarians, and hopefully you guys. So it's out. Inosanto's doing virtual events. Let me know if you're interested. Okay, moving on. Some of you may have heard me already talk about this book, Addie at Law. It's my favorite of our kids' books on the fall list. And I mention it because not just because it has this awesome cover that I love, but because the author lives in Alabama and the book takes place in Alabama, and it features a feisty 12-year-old with animal rights at the forefront of her interests. Kirkus gave it a star review saying that Addie's voice is authentic. It's a double must read for all animal lovers. And I think that kids who love books by like Blue Balliet, Rebecca Stead, will really be inspired by Addie's, her budding activism and her growing confidence in fighting against bullies and her racist neighbors, and in animal rights, as I said. So this one I'm not going to talk about so much, but obviously interest for you guys because of this Southern storyline here, but this is a new book in our For Young People's series, adapted books of science and history for middle grade readers and above. The novelist Patricia Harubi Powell says this page turner should be required reading. So, and it's got a nice cover, so why not share it? Okay, so those are some highlights from the kids list. Now I'm going to move to some adult books. Farewell Ghosts by Nadia Terranova is our lead fiction for the fall. It is out now. Hopefully you'll want to stock up. You see this beautiful blurb by Annie Ernaux on the cover. This is the first book by this award-winning Italian writer to appear in English. It is translated by Anne Goldstein, who you know from Ferrante Fever. And if your customers are looking for new books because they've gobbled up all the Ferrante, then by all means recommend this. Every rave review we've gotten so far compares her to Ferrante, and there's the Anne Goldstein connection, of course. And yeah, if you click through the link to Edelweiss, you can see all kinds of blurbs and great stuff. And like Ferrante, there's a woman in Italy whose relationship with a friend and with her mother are very fraught, and she's looking at her life now in relation to the sort of traumatized child that she was. It's really beautiful. Okay, I'm talking really fast, so I hope you can all follow this. Now, this is the book that we're really excited about for the spring list. It comes out in February. This is a really beautiful, unusual book. It's written by Olga Tokarczuk, who won the 2018 Nobel Prize in Literature. It's illustrated by Joanna Consejo. And it weaves the voice and the pictures together. There are not a lot of words. It is full illustrations throughout. And I wish I had some images to show you, but I'm sure you'll find them on Edelweiss. Some interiors. The drawings are extraordinary, just detailed and so beautiful. And we're publishing this as an adult book. Around the world, it's coming out in some cases as a children's book, but it's pretty deep. It can go, it's for readers of all ages. It's just a really beautiful book that's this moving reflection on our capacity to live in peace. I'm sorry, I'm gonna read this because this is the copy here. A deeply moving reflection on our capacity to live in peace with ourselves, to remain patient and attentive to the world. There are few words and few full illustrations on every page, as I said. Here in this story, a man has forgotten what makes his heart feel full. He moves away to a house from all that is familiar to him to wait for his soul to return. We have this incredible blurb from Annie Proulx. Siri Hustvedt describes it as a story we need to hear and see now in our brutal present, the parable of a soul lost and found. It's really special. I wish we had it out for you in time for holiday sales, but alas, we don't. Next Christmas. There's so much more in the list. I could go on. I have no idea how much time I've used, so I'm just gonna kind of wrap up and tell you to please check out our Edelweiss list. There's so much more coming out, including a gorgeous memoir by the poet and former Floridian Spencer Reese that has blurbs from Louise Glick, Andrew Solomon, Colm Tóibín, a reissue of Nelson Algren's great novel, Never Come Morning, that has a newly discovered introduction by Richard Wright. And really, really excited also about, I'm gonna show you this cover because it's so beautiful. A debut novel, well, debut in English novel called Arcadia, translated from the French by Emmanuel Béhémac-Tam. This is a really epic, cool novel about that there's an intersex narrator, and the way that they look at the world just completely subverts our conceptions of gender and culture in general, environmentalism, and it's pretty crazy and great. So there's a lot more. Thank you so much for listening, and check out the links. And I'm done. Thank you. Oh, I have to stop screen sharing, sorry. Here we go.
Thank you so much, Ruth. And we have Lauren back. Isn't this an exciting new world we live in? Lauren, we're gonna jump right back in with you. Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I'm so sorry about that. My computer crashed, and if I wasn't convinced it was Mercury in retrograde, now I'm sold. So I apologize. I'm not really even sure where I left off in my little presentation, so I'm just going to hop in, and I apologize if I repeated myself. I'm just going to talk for a second about kind of the things that inform my acquisitions, and then talk about 3 titles. So translations are really my passion project, but I also acquire English language fiction and nonfiction. And in general, I'm really on the lookout for intersectional, nuanced titles that will advance the feminist cultural conversation. I think in a time where feminism has more mainstream market appeal than ever, I really think it's our role to champion the most insurgent and marginalized voices. There will always be authors who, for systemic reasons, struggle to see their work in print, and I really believe that it's the Feminist Press's mandate to lift up those authors specifically. So 3 titles that I think really perfectly encapsulate the list and our mission as well. The first is a work of translated nonfiction that came out just last week, Grieving, Dispatches from a Wounded Country by Christina Rivera Garza, translated from the Spanish by Sarah Booker. This is the second book we've published of Christina's, the first being the gender-bent Gothic novel, The Iliac Crest. The latest, though, Grieving, is a hybrid essay collection on systemic violence in Mexico and the importance of coming together as a society to collectively heal. The book was originally published in Spanish a decade ago, and I just want to speak for a second about the editing process. Like The Iliac Crest, it was just such a unique experience. Sarah and I worked really closely with Christina to update this essay collection, cutting old pieces, adding in new writing, speaking to Trump's election, COVID, what have you. And there are even some pieces featured in Grieving that Christina wrote in English. So always a hybrid project with Christina. And the result with Grieving is a book that's all too timely, to use a word, yet deeply hopeful about how we can move forward together through difficult times. We've excitingly received glowing reviews from the New York Times and the Washington Post for the book, and Christina was also named a MacArthur Fellow on the day that the book was released. So that was fantastic news, and we're thrilled for her. Secondly, I wanted to highlight a forthcoming anthology, the Echoing Ida collection, which will be released this coming January. For those unfamiliar, Echoing Ida is a collective of Black women and non-binary writers who write in the legacy of Ida B. Wells. They are journalists, reporters, with careers rooted in the struggle for reproductive justice, for trans rights, and they harness the power of media for social justice. The book compiles the best of the collective's writing for the first time, includes a wide variety of pieces, including personal essays, journalistic essays, poetry, comics, what have you. Some contributors include Raquel Willis, Renee Bracey-Sherman, Jasmine Burnett, Elizabeth Dosgay, and many more. Also, fangirling here for a minute, Michelle Duster, the great-granddaughter of Ida B. Wells, has written the book's foreword. So that was a dream working with her. Finally, I hope you can indulge me talking about an older title that came out in March of this year, Fiebre Tropical by Juli Delgado Lopera. This is a queer coming-of-age novel based on the author's own experience migrating from Bogota to Miami. I love this book. The book is hilarious and tragic in turns, but just addictive. Many of the scenes in the book take place at a Hyatt hotel ballroom where this local evangelical church meets. There's abstinent salsa dancing, baptisms for the dead, and sparks fly between the protagonist Francisca and the local pastor's daughter. Fantastic, juicy plot aside, what attracted me most to the project when I was reading this in manuscript stage was its cutting edge use of Spanglish. Juli really seamlessly integrates Colombian slang into the English text, creating what I really believe and what I hope is the future of American literature. And I mention it today because the novel has been named a finalist for the Kirkus Prize for Fiction. So fingers crossed in a few weeks, we'll see. Anyway, thank you so much again for your time and for all your support and lifting up our titles. You know, anything you need, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can contact me at, my email is Lauren, Lauren, @feministpress.org. We're distributed by Consortium. Thank you again, and wishing you all well for the rest of this chaotic year.
Thank you so much, Lauren. We're glad we got you back, and I hope your computer behaves itself. We have just one more press left. So if you have any questions for any of the presses that you've heard today, you can throw those in the chat. This has been awesome. We've seen so many great things. And last up, but certainly not least, we have Europa Editions. Rachel Small is the Director of Publicity. Rachel, go ahead.
Thanks so much, Anna, and thanks everyone for sticking around. Although, I mean, listening to those amazing presentations, those amazing books, I don't see how anyone could leave. So I am a bit of an anomaly on this list because I do publicity, but I also edit a number of our translations from French and Spanish, so I'm not entirely out of place. I am going to start, I'm going to share my screen by talking about a bit of an anomaly on our list. So Europa, you probably know us best for quality international fiction, authors like Elena Ferrante, Muriel Barbary, but a couple years ago, we launched a nonfiction line called Europa Compass, which have been sort of small books filled with big ideas, most up to this point entirely in translation. Atlantis is sort of the Europa Compass book par excellence, and it follows a trip across the globe in a boat with the acclaimed architect Renzo Piano and his son Carlo, who is an esteemed journalist in his own right. They take off from Genoa and travel again, around the world in a boat in search of Atlantis, along the way visiting a number of Renzo's iconic buildings, including the New Whitney Museum in New York, the Pompidou Center in Paris, and Osaka's Kansai Airport, which I think is really cool, is built on a man-made island. Atlantis is once a conversation between the father and his son about their relationships to each other, their relationships to the world, the relationships of buildings to the places in which they're built. It's also a document of an artist and architect's preoccupations and a meditation on the nature of beauty. It's a travelogue for armchair travelers, which I think we're all forced to be these days. And Renzo and Carlo write in engaging and often really humorous prose, which has been beautifully rendered into English by Will Shutt, and are amiable and erudite companions. It's a perfect gift book for fathers, sons, architecture buffs, travel fans, and it's going to be a standout on the Europa Compass list. And it's already got a beautiful starred review from Kirkus. Moving on to an American book. So the New York Times bestselling author Aaron Gwyn is based in North Carolina. He teaches American literature and fiction writing at UNC Charlotte. And All God's Children is his beautiful new novel that Publishers Weekly called a masterpiece of Western fiction in the tradition of Cormac McCarthy and James Carlos Blake. It is a historical epic that spans 30 years in the lives of three people: an illiterate frontiersman named Sam, a runaway teenage slave named Cecilia, whose dreams of freedom are nourished by her multiple readings during her childhood of the Odyssey, and Duncan, who is a young gay man fleeing scandal. Each one of them is trying to capture the American ideal of freedom on the Western frontier in a struggle that still resonates today. The characters have been hailed by Booklist as unforgettable, and by Gwyn's able pen, they are rendered as sympathetic and human in all their passions and foibles. It is a pre-Civil War epic that lays bare the incredible paradoxes of inequality upon which the US was built, and which continued to be built with its westward expansion. I'm happy to send along ebooks or physical copies if any of you want them. The author is available for events. I wish I could bring him to your stores on a real tour, but he's great at virtual events as well. And I'm happy to make that introduction. Next, I am going to move us to the UK with The River Within. This book publishes December 1st. It's been described by readers, reviewers, and fellow authors as Hamlet set in 1955 Yorkshire, England. And it's written in prose that feels like it was just plucked out of the era that its characters inhabit. It's set in the small village of Starome, where a group of young people stumble upon the body of their friend Danny Masters, which is found floating in the river that cuts through the town and sort of menaces the village. In Danny's death, nobody is beyond suspicion. And as the truth about what happened is unveiled, the various people in his life, the girl he loved named Lenny, who's sort of our Ophelia, if we're going with the Hamlet metaphor, to Alexander, the rich young man who he envied, to Alexander's mother. Everyone is implicated and nobody is safe. Kirkus gave this book a starred review and called it a mesmerizing escape. And Karen Powell is a gifted author. And this novel will surely provide many readers a welcome respite from our current reality. I will very quickly talk about a very large book called Cathedral. I don't know if you can see me while I'm sharing my screen, but I'm holding up the galley, which is enormous. Cathedral is an enormous book in terms of page count, ambition, prose, themes, an expansive cast of characters. It reads as a mix of Ken Follett's Pillars of the Earth and Umberto Eco's The Name of the Rose. and it will appeal to fans of Hilary Mantel and Andrew Miller. It is set in a fictional Rhineland city called Hagenberg in the Middle Ages in the 12th and 13th centuries, and charts the construction of a monumental cathedral, which will take decades and a seemingly endless influx of money to complete. It is told in a chorus of voices. It's a story about ambition, politics, the rise of mercantilism, class, corruption, religion, art, inspiration. It's incredibly atmospheric and extremely cinematic. And there have already been notes of interest from TV and film producers. Kirkus gave this beautiful book a starred review as well and called it a thoroughly engrossing, beautifully told look at human frailty. And I'm sure I'm running out of time, but before I go, I can't not talk about Miyako Kawakami, one of my favorite authors to join the Europa list in the past few years. So this spring, we published her novel Breasts and Eggs, which is this gorgeous feminist tome that follows the lives of 3 working class women in Japan and their troubled relationships to each other and to their own bodies. That book got amazing reviews in Entertainment Weekly, the New York Times, NPR, New Yorker, BuzzFeed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And there were profiles of Kawakami in Elle, Entertainment Weekly, Electric Literature, New York Times. Heaven is her follow-up novel. It is not a sequel, but the second Kawakami novel that we will be publishing in translation. And I was a bit worried because I loved Breasts and Eggs so much that Heaven would not live up to everything that Breasts and Eggs did, but it absolutely does. And Kawakami turns her raw writing and her harsh realism to look at the issue of bullying. It's told in the voice of a 14-year-old boy who has a lazy eye and is bullied at school. He's referred to as Eyes by his classmates, and he's befriended by a young girl in his class, and they find solace and strength in each other. It's harrowingly beautiful. The descriptions of bullying are devastating, but Kawakami's prose just pulls you along. We're expecting big things from this new novel. So this is coming out in May of 2021, and we'll be publishing the paperback edition of Breasts and Eggs a couple months before that. So stay tuned, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Rachel, and thank you everyone, to all of our bookstore guests, and for Siba for putting this on. And everybody, have a great day. Thank you.